Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsey Cortes, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hey fans and listeners, it's Lindsey Cortes, registered sports dietitian and your host of the podcast. So in case you didn't know, I do have some help with this podcast. Ruby is my podcast manager and assistant, and she helps coordinate with guests and come up with topic suggestions. She had a great idea that since we just hit around 200 episodes, she had a great idea of her interviewing me. So a little background on Ruby. She's been helping out with Rise Up Nutrition for quite a few years now. She is a pre-med student and an athlete herself, focusing on running, but she's dabbled with biking and triathlons and things like that too. So she gets it. And Ruby, I'm going to let you take the wheel on this episode.
Thanks, Lindsey. Yeah, so I thought we'd have a bit of a fun episode to celebrate getting to 200 episodes, which we have missed a few weeks, so this is actually our 4-year anniversary of the podcast too. So congratulations, Lindsey.
Thank you.
Over the past few years, we've had lots of highs and lows with the podcast and Lindsey's life as a whole. And so I thought we'd start by diving a little bit into her family and how that has evolved. Because when we started the podcast, Lindsey didn't have any kids, and now she has 2 beautiful toddlers. Not only were they born and babies, they're now walking and talking and toddlering. And then, during Lindsey's pregnancy with Gabe and after Lindsey was born, she expressed a few anxieties about how she would manage her work as a dietitian and podcasting with parenting and her own training and activity and potentially like meal prepping and jobs that she does outside of work, especially as her husband, Rob, who's in the military, isn't home during the day. So I thought we'd start off by asking Lindsey about how she has managed balancing work and training with parenting. Or haven't you?
Right. Well, so many things have shifted. So I don't even know that balancing is the right word. It's more that I've just had to prioritize differently and make choices and make decisions. So yeah, when I started this podcast, I had my own business and I was working full-time, more than full-time, because it was my own business and I was really invested in it. And so, I was working 50, 60 hours a week in my job and my passion, my love. When I was pregnant with my first child, I knew that I would have to find childcare if I wanted to keep working. But in my heart, I never wanted my child to be full-time in a daycare program or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with parents who choose that. I just knew, hey, I have my own business. I work from home. I don't need that. And I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom on some level. So, I set up arrangements for him to be in part-time childcare. And even with that, though, things had to shift. I had to expand out my team. I hired on another dietitian because I couldn't do 60 hours of work in 30 hours anymore. And business was growing and I didn't want to stop the momentum. So I outsourced a lot of work. And it meant that my role in work also shifted. Instead of me being like the person who did everything, I had to be more of like a manager, a CEO, as opposed to just the dietitian. And I really enjoyed that on some level. When I was pregnant with Levi, my second child, I assumed I would kind of adjust in the same ways. But first things first, every child is different. You never know what's going to happen, and the family is growing. So that was probably not a great assumption of mine. And then second of all, he was born with a medical condition that just flipped our whole world upside down. And at that time, even though I had built up a team and hired Jenna as a second dietitian and had help, I actually couldn't even fulfill that role of being a manager, being a CEO anymore. Now that I was not only a mom of two, but a medical mom and bearing the day in and day out responsibilities, as well as the emotional toll of having a child with a life-threatening condition. So I really had to make a decision to shut down business. And that was really hard. At the same time, it wasn't, because it's where my heart was. I needed to shut down business. So when we say, oh, are we balancing work and parenting and training? It's like, well, the balance was letting something go. Now, what I do want to stress is great is like when you make a decision, it doesn't have to be permanent, doesn't have to be forever. I decided, hey, I want to keep the podcast going. And I had a few longstanding clients that knew my personal situation and, we were willing to able to keep working together in a very like more hands-off way, but just keep that relationship going in a way that benefited them. And here I am, Levi's now 18 months as of tomorrow, a year and a half old. And I'm actually like, whoa, I'm ready to re-engage and work again. And I can't go back to what I was doing before, but I'm figuring out how to navigate it in a different way. So prioritizing, making decisions, nothing has to be forever, but, make a decision for what you need and like just morphing, just kind of going with it. And kids are always changing too. So what I needed, when Levi was 3 months old is very different than what he needs at 18 months old, which is going to be very different than when he's 3. And so just keeping that very open mind and just trying to figure out a way forward is just my approach right now. You also mentioned how my balancing training, I'm not as competitive as I used to be. I even thought this summer, I was like, ooh, maybe this fall I can sign up for some races again, because I was getting a little bit more childcare help this fall. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to sign up for a race. Well, no, because then I got plantar fasciitis. And then also I decided that with a little bit of extra childcare, I want to re-engage and work a little bit. And so, I'm just right now with training, I'm doing it to feel good in my body, also feel good mentally, because I do notice after like 3 days in a row of not training, I mentally, like I need that endorphin release. I need that self-care time. And so my training is just truly for personal and health reasons, not for anything competitive right now. But through this podcast, sorry to keep going on a tangent here, but through this podcast, I love when I talk to women. Like we just had an episode with Jen St. Jean, whose whole thing is to be faster as a master. And I've talked to so many women who are finding athletic success post children. I shouldn't say post, but after, when their kids are 10 years old or something like that, in their 40s, in their 50s. And so I'm hopeful for that for my own future. I've prioritized, it doesn't have to be right now. I don't have to be competitive right now, but maybe in the future I can be.
I love that perspective. And the reason why I really wanted to dive into that question is because I think it's quite rare that, especially if you're the entrepreneur and with your own business, that you were willing to let that go indefinitely. And I think it was like you said, you didn't regret it. And I noticed that from the outset too. Like, it wasn't like you were trying to dabble in a half-hearted. You were like, this business either needs my full self or I need to pull back. And I think that was a really brave decision for you.
Yeah.
And then I was going to ask what advice you have, but you kind of said that. It was like prioritizing, like focusing on the here and now rather than trying to like project into the future how things would be.
Yeah.
And asking for help when you need it, and then recognizing when you need to let things go. And I wanted to tie this into, because we know our audience is a lot of like high school and college student athletes, and this could be applicable for them when they're maybe not parenting, but they're in school. And instead of trying to balance like parenting with their own work or activities and training, they're trying to balance it with perhaps a social life or additional schoolwork or extracurriculars. I think student athletes can find themselves in similar positions. And would you have any advice that you'd offer them?
Yeah, it's similar advice of just making a prioritizing what's important to you without getting too far ahead in like what this means for the rest of your life. And I think keeping in mind too, there's no right or wrong. So when I was a student athlete, I definitely felt that pull of like, I want to be social. I want to go to this thing on a Friday night, but like, I also want to feel good in my body and not be sleep deprived. And I think giving yourself permission not to decide, you know what, I'm going to be the party animal, or no, I'm never going to parties. I'm going to be the strict, regimented athlete that goes to bed at 10. Like, you don't have to define yourself as one or the other. Like, what do you need that Friday? Do you need to be around friends and have a good time and let go of stress and laugh? Then do that. Are you feeling so run down and exhausted that you need to go to bed early? Then do that. Like, as much as you can, try to meet your needs where you're at without thinking that this defines who you are or defines your future.
Yeah, I love that. That kind of resonates with a lot of the elite athletes we have on that talk about not having a single identity and knowing that you have different needs and that at different times you need to meet them all, and addressing your different needs actually helps you be a better athlete because it develops you as a whole person.
I actually had a little side conversation with my sister recently. We were kind of reflecting on identities, that topic, and reflecting on the work I do that is very often with a high school or college athlete. And we kind of realize that it's like, when you are that age, you don't have multiple identities yet. And that's why if you've dedicated yourself to training for a sport and being an athlete, like that feels like your whole identity, because you don't have your identity as, I have my identity as a dietitian now in my career and a business owner and as a mom and as a wife, that now I have multiple identities that when I was 16, I didn't. But give yourself permission, even at 16, that your multiple identities might be an athlete and a really great friend. And maybe you're also a sister. Maybe you are a dog lover or a pet owner. Like those, and not that we have to identify ourselves all the time, but like you do have other things to lean into, even if it's not as clear cut as when you get older, you kind of can embrace those more. Anyway, sorry about that tangent. We have so much more to talk about.
No, that's okay. As you get older, you tend to have kind of more kind of labels like dietitian, mom, this, that. Whereas when you're young, you're like, I'm Ruby, I go to school and I run. So like you're a student and you're an athlete.
Right. But you are more than that.
Yeah. We're just going to jump, I'm a podcast manager. We're just going to jump back to at the beginning when you mentioned Levi. And in episodes 140 and 143, which we will link below in this episode, you share the sad news your youngest son, Levi, was born with a potentially life-threatening condition, glycogen storage disease, that is currently incurable. You've shared here on the podcast and social media about some of the most challenging and scary times that have included long stays in hospital and minimal, if any, home support at times. Fast forward on like the year and a half it's been, and Levi seems to be thriving. You tell me, how is Levi doing? And what's the dynamic with him and Gabe? And does Gabe realize that Levi has additional needs? Does he feel any like jealousy or anything like that?
So Levi is thriving. And, in many ways, I feel so blessed. Ugh, man, this is so hard to express because now that I am in that community of people who have children with special needs, medical needs, like it's so hard not to compare yourself to others. So even when I say I feel blessed that he's thriving and that like you look at him from the outside and you would think nothing's wrong with him, like I do feel so blessed to say that, but I don't want other people to think that they're not blessed with how their child is doing with a different scenario. Just so you know, I'm so enlightened now as the struggles that people go through with their children and medical needs and just being more understanding of things like that. But anyways, he really is doing amazing. And what's different now, the age he is now versus when he was born, is I had so much fear when he was born of what life would look like and fear of the unknown, what his life would be. And as he's aging and like I said, as he's thriving, I have so much more confidence now that he is going to live like a full, wonderful, seemingly normal life. And that's all any parent wants for their kid.
I think at the beginning, it was like I remember you posting like every month he'd have his new kind of monthly post. And now it's like, we don't need to post him anymore because like he's going to be here. Whereas it was kind of like marking each month as it went by. And now we're like, Levi's set up for life.
Yes. So I'm feeling really good about that. Like he's doing great. he definitely, I think my day in and day out is still, compared to somebody who has a child that doesn't have medical needs, we are affected by it every single day. Frankly, as ridiculous as it sounds, every hour of every day, maybe even every half hour. My husband and I don't start a conversation without saying, what's Levi's blood sugar?
So that was going to be a future question.
Like he comes home from work, like, hey, how's your day? What's Levi's blood sugar? Like it is a constant because that is his condition. Although he's thriving, his condition is based on time. We have to feed him every 75 to 90 minutes in order to live. He can't go 100 minutes without food. He's at risk of critically low blood sugar, seizures, and death that quickly. And so sleeping nighttime is still like, it's become my normal, but the truth is like this is how people with his condition die, is they die overnight in their sleep. So because if like Levi is continuously fed on a tube feeding, but like sometimes he pulls it out, he gets tangled up in his tube, and then we're dealing with at 3 a.m. a catastrophic accident. And these things still happen every night. So those things are like traveling, for example. We actually just this weekend drove up to Austin, which is only an hour and a half drive from me, but then we were going to be there for a few hours. The amount of formula I had to bring for him, not just to, hey, this is more than enough for what we need, but what if something happens while we're away from the house? All of his supplies we have to bring, all of the emergency care stuff, just in case. We have traveled. My parents and family live in Massachusetts. So we went this summer to go visit. We're going to go again for Christmas. I had to ship things out there ahead of time. We have to get special TSA clearance and even just the flight itself, like it was really difficult, extremely difficult. So those things are still hard.
And I can't even imagine when you're trying to travel with all those liquids, like they get angry.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think too, like the level of stress in our day to day is heightened, but it's becoming our normal. But then you asked about Gabe.
Yeah.
And, this is normal for Gabe as well. It was so cute. A few weeks ago, he was like trying to attach Levi's tube feeding cord. He has a G-tube button in his stomach, but Gabe does not. And Gabe took Levi's G-tube and was trying to put it in his own belly button.
Yeah, where's my button?
Yeah, he's like, where's my button? It was so cute. So this is just, he doesn't know that that's abnormal. It's not what he does.
Yeah.
And I try to stimulate conversation. This is for Levi's tube feeding, or this is Levi's, you eat food, and so anyways, it is Gabe's normal. With that being said, there's challenges on Gabe as well, because every 75 to 90 minutes, Gabe's life gets interrupted so that we can prioritize Levi.
But I mean, over the summer, they did seem to have a lot of like brotherly love together. And it's kind of cute seeing them kind of be rough with each other, or Gabe being rough with Levi, because it makes you realize that Levi is not this bubble wrap kid. He can be tough too.
No, not at all. And Levi, a little background too with his condition, since we feed him so often. I think genetically, both my boys are big. Gabe looks like he's 4. He's only 2.
Oh, Levi's big.
And Levi looks like a little football player. He's got this amazing, I know I'm speaking of bodies here, but he's got this amazing little belly that's just like adorable, like his little Santa Claus.
And his little cheeks on his face.
Yes. And so he's holding his own. When Gabe's tackling him, he's tackling right back now. So so Levi's doing really, really good. I feel blessed. I feel grateful. I am still struggle. I still get emotional. It's still really hard. It still challenges how we parent Gabe. It challenges my relationship with my husband and my entire family. But, there's always something. Everybody has something in their life, and some of us have multiple things. And this is just something that we're facing, but we've got a long, it's going to be, it's Levi's entire life. It's going to be his whole life. There is no cure except for getting an entirely new liver, which actually is not recommended. I'm not going to go down that road on the podcast right now, but it's probably unlikely that he'll get a new liver in his lifetime, but that actually would be his cure, a whole new liver.
Oh, okay. And then briefly, I want to know what impact Levi and his disease has had on you and your family and your diet and food choices, because I did know a few months ago you posted about going sugar-free, and that seems kind of like the antithesis of being like the dietitian you are.
Yes. So without going into all the detail, I'll encourage people to read the blog article. We can post it in the show notes. But Levi, with his condition, his body cannot metabolize any sugar whatsoever. No sucrose, no fructose, no lactose. He should probably never in his life really eat a piece of candy nor a piece of fruit in his entire life. Even things like Greek yogurt that are natural, like sugar, plain unflavored, but it's got natural lactose he shouldn't even have. So the impact, read the article to see how I kind of went through my experience with, should we all remove sugar from our diet now?
No.
And no, the answer is no. And also, interestingly, Levi has a lot of feeding concerns. He's 18 months old. When Gabe was 18 months old, he was eating real food all the time. Levi is not. He relies on his formula to live. We just had feeding therapy this morning, right before this podcast episode. He's struggling with swallowing. He has a lot of gagging and throwing up. So it's difficult to manage his food. And I have to literally take food away from him sometimes. Like, no, that's not safe. You can't metabolize that. And it's hard. But we do, I think, as a family, we're very mindful because this is an everyday thing with Levi. You read the article, you'll learn that like we have expanded in foods that are less sugar or sugar-free that all of us can eat.
Yeah, and you're not talking about diet foods here. You're just talking about different options.
No. But it is things like, I honestly, with Gabe, never used to have him snack on like meat sticks as a snack. And now I do because I'm like, oh, that's a great option for both of them, even though Levi can't even actually eat it yet. But,
just in case Levi got hold of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just expanding our food options as opposed to restricting. You think no sugar, you think restrict. Instead, I found a way to expand. And I think maybe one other impact on us as a family, though, is I have kind of found a little bit more of a routine. This might be less because of Levi and more because of motherhood and parenting, that what makes our life simple. Like these are our go-to breakfasts, our go-to snacks. So as much as I am a dietitian that encourages variety and food freedom and, eat what you want type of thing, in our day-to-day life, having some sort of like system routine really works. These are our go-to dinners. These are our go-to snacks. Like we typically buy similar things at the grocery store, and it's not restrictive. It's just like, this is what works for us. Does that make sense?
I think that's really applicable, to college students too.
Totally.
They might be cooking or eating, like cooking all their meals for the first time and balancing a really busy schedule, that just have some like meals that will meet your needs. A go-to meals. Like it's not staying in the same thing every day, but it's like, what you need and you are able to get them from the store accessibly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This works for athletes as well, for sure.
As much as like, this is kind of bad to say, if Levi was to be born to a parent, I think having you as a dietitian is a blessing for him too.
It really is. Yeah.
So we're going to transition to some podcast questions as a whole, but to kick that off, I've got a little podcast trivia.
Oh boy.
Okay. This is we're going to start off with looking at some of the most popular episodes over the last 4 years.
Oh boy.
I've got a list of the top 3. Any guesses?
I think our episode with Stacy Sims.
Okay.
Was really popular.
That is correct. That was episode 141. And that is by far our most popular episode. And all of these will be linked in the show notes.
She's a really, really big name person. And I think she's on a lot of podcasts, but I think her, it was really fitting.
People aren't getting enough of her.
Yeah, we can't get enough of it, basically. So that was great to have her. So the next person I'd like to say, because she was a really big name, but it was such an old one, which in one sense means it could have a lot of views and listeners. In another sense, it might have gotten buried and forgotten about. But it was like episode 8 or something. I had Mary Kane on because she was one of my former clients. Is that up there?
I love that episode. It was nowhere close. This is kind of a trick question because number 2 was Stacy Sims again, because we re-released her episode for 167 and it was the second most popular episode. It just had a new title, and I guess people thought it was great information worth re-listening to.
That is a trick question, and also, that was a repeat episode.
But it had a new title, so people thought new information. Okay, the next 2, so I put 4 in, because number 2 is technically a trick.
Right.
And the next 2 are fairly more recent. I mean, I guess the top ones are also more recent. And one is a big name, and one is a big name dietitian, and one is an elite athlete.
Oh, okay. Was it Meghann Featherstun?
Yes, she comes in 3rd behind the 2 Stacy Sims. This was a super informative episode with Meghann Featherstun. about
Yeah.
pre-race nutrition, fueling competitions when you're traveling or away from home, preventing and dealing with GI distress, carbohydrate loading. Meghann and Lindsey talk about hydration and sodium needs for athletes, as well as sweat rate calculators and electrolytes. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, I've tried more recently, since we've had more dietitians on, I've really tried to get more specific. I think in our early episodes when I had dietitians on, I spoke very generally. And now I'm like, wait a second, no. Like Megan's bread and butter, so to speak, or I should say graham crackers and bagels, because that's her thing, right? Her bread and butter, graham cracker and bagels is fueling for marathon. So I really tried to dive in specifically for that.
I mean, it has great advice for anyone in any sport that's like fueling away from home, like when they're outside of their normal routines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I did that with her and a few of the other dietitians we've had on in more recent, like more in the past year. I've tried to really dial in those conversations. And I think another reason for that too is from my perspective, I'm like, oh man, at the time over the past year, wasn't working one-on-one with clients. And I felt this like, I need to give people more specifics since I am not working with you, you know?
Yeah, I think it's great when people have specific questions that they need answers to.
Yeah.
And then number 4 was one that I don't think you'll guess, because I didn't either, but I also really love this episode. It was 180, How to Fuel for Better Performance and Recovery Like an Elite Athlete with Carrie Verdon. Carrie is an elite runner who competes in the US Olympic marathon trials while being a full-time school teacher and coach. In this episode, she shares her story about struggling with an eating disorder in high school and college that resulted in multiple injuries and illnesses and ultimately ended her running career for several years.
Yeah.
She, after this indefinite break, she actually returned to running better than ever and has gone on to compete at the higher level before as a result of proper fueling a weight gain, which is obviously something really scary and daunting to a lot of our clients.
Wow. Carrie was an amazing guest. I'm not sure I would have guessed. I didn't know what the next most popular one was. So I think that really speaks to our audience probably really wanting to know, like, if they have to step away from sport, if they are injured, if they have to heal, if they have to, do something that feels like, ooh, this is taking me away from my sport. And yet it is exactly what allowed Carrie to get back into it and return at a higher level later. And I think that's an important message to give people.
Yeah, people think like, if I go through recovery or if I step away, like, will I be a worse athlete? And then she shows that.
Yeah, is this it? Is that the end of my career? And it doesn't have to be.
Okay, so we're going to return to some questions about the podcast as a whole.
Okay.
First of all, what impact did you have? What impact did you want the podcast to have originally 4 years ago? And do you feel like this has been achieved?
Okay, so no reason to lie about it. The reason I started the podcast was just another marketing technique for my business. How can I get the word out there of what I have to offer and how I can help people on a different platform that's not just, an Instagram post or a Facebook group. So it was another marketing tool per se. With that said, I'm not a huge podcast junkie. Some people love listening to tons of podcasts. Like I don't. I like podcasts, but I'm not a podcast junkie. That's all I need to say there. When I do listen to podcasts, I get really frustrated when there's lots of fluff and not like what I need. Like if I'm searching something, like to be transparent, I was recently searching symptoms of ADHD in toddlers and looking for podcasts. So I typed that in the search bar, looking for podcasts, and like I want my answers. I don't want fluff. And so that's when I got into podcasting myself, I was like, I don't want to just to talk. I really want to get good information to people that listening to this episode, it's transformative in some way. It's helpful in some way that it's really truly opened their eyes or they've learned something like that. I just didn't want fluff just to talk.
Well, if you want like episodes that have no fluff, check out the new series called Fast Fueling Facts, where Lindsey gets straight down to the nitty gritty in about 15 minutes and tells you some important takeaways.
Thank you for that plug. Perfect timing. Yes. And I realize not all of my episodes are full of information because I also do enjoy talking. I found even though I had this intention of don't talk just to talk, I love talking. I love speaking. I love connecting with people. And over the years, that's become one of my favorite things of podcasting is like, I'm just having this genuine, authentic conversation with somebody. It just so happens that 2,000 people might be listening to it later, but I don't think about that at the time. And so, things have morphed in 4 years, but that was my intention in the beginning was get my word out there for business and have like takeaways for people that this really impacts them. And yeah, things have morphed because then like over the past year, I haven't been saying like sign up for my services. I've been like, this is it. I don't have a business anymore, which is changing, FYI. But, so I kept the podcast going even though I didn't even have a program or my services to market. So things have morphed.
I love that because the second part was, do you feel like that's been achieved? And actually you're saying, really like the podcast has transformed it to its own thing. It's not like what I created it for, but yeah, it helps you build connections and almost feel more connected to your working life while you've not been working, or like more connected to like the dietitian space. And this is going to be a hard thing, but what are you most proud of with the podcast? Is it those conversations?
No, what I'm most proud of is that it is helping people that I don't even know. So I have a conversation. I feel like I know that person, but then suddenly I get an Instagram message or an email or a reshare of somebody reposting that I don't know. Somebody posted it and it was all written in Spanish. I used Translate to see what it said, but I saw the little heart emojis and stuff, and they reposted an episode on their social media account. And it was like my favorite podcast. I was like, who are you? This is so cool that people across the country and across the world find what I have to say interesting or helpful. That is so cool. That's so cool. And I love when people, if you send me a message and let me know that something I said was helpful, like I'm going to respond to you because that means the world to me. Because I am doing that, even though I said that's so cool, like, and it feels kind of selfish, but I am doing it for you. So if I didn't get those messages to say, love this episode, that really made a difference for me, like I probably would have in the past year let the podcast go because it doesn't make me money. The podcast doesn't make me money. I was strapped for time, not working anymore. And yet I kept this going because I felt like it was important. Something pulled me to say, this is needed. And it's because of the people that I don't even know who are benefiting. Maybe the people who are never going to sign up for my services because they can't afford it or just doesn't make sense in their life, still benefiting them. That I think that's what I'm most proud of. And the second thing that I'm proud of is I've connected with other dietitians, some sports dietitians, some up and coming dietitians, and some just like even people that I assumed were maybe their careers somewhat ahead of mine have told me that they use my podcast as a resource for their clients or that they've used some of my language to help in their client sessions. That is also really cool to me.
I think you're realizing the impact you're having through the podcast. And yeah, we do get lots of messages either to your social media or to email inbox with people sharing their stories. And it is heartwarming. And a little behind the scenes is oftentimes I reach out to guests that I think would be great fits. And Lindsey might not necessarily know them. And then after she's done some research and we both chatted a bit beforehand, she goes on to have these wonderful conversations. And then it's connected to people that she didn't know before. And it really grows a network and it's having an impact. And like you said, it's not making money, it's taking money. And if it wasn't having this impact, I don't think that either of us would have fought so hard to keep it this past year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the impact is the most, well, I forget the question. What's the most rewarding thing about doing the podcast?
I'm proud, but yeah, rewarding. I mean, I think you've answered it.
Proud. Yeah, I'm proud of the impact that it's having. And I don't want to gloat. I know it's not helpful to everybody. I know it's, it's not like it's.
Well, we get hate messages.
But yeah, but like it's, if it's helping a decent amount of people, then I'm proud of that.
It certainly is. Now, I want to know about turn the tables around. Has the podcast impacted your relationship with food, your body, or training at all? Or have you learned anything new in that respect?
Well, pending the guest, there might be things that I learn. And I very often say that when I'm having a conversation, like, ooh, I never knew that before, So the conversations I have, I myself might learn something new or think about something differently. And I think this is the important thing about anybody throughout their life we continue to need food no matter what our age, no matter how competitive an athlete we are. Throughout different life stages, things change. So how I fueled when I was 15 is different than how I'm fueling now. Doesn't mean that one is more correct than the other. It just means that I need different things than I did before, right? And so by having these conversations, it's helpful to always kind of reevaluate where you're at, what you need. So I think that's helpful for listeners too, and why I would encourage listeners to keep listening, because what's working for you in your diet right now, you might have it all figured out, but maybe in a year it's not going so good. And you listen to a couple episodes and you're reminded, oh, I need to focus on fiber a bit more. Or you're reminded, oh yeah, my recovery's been slipping. Or you're reminded,
hydrate.
Whatever that you're reminded that, you know what, I never used to struggle with hydration. Suddenly I am. And just by having the conversation or listening to the conversation, you're simply reminded.
Yeah.
And therefore being more proactive in your life. So I can't say that like I've drastically, like having the podcast has drastically changed my nutrition, but it's the constant reminder to reevaluate, reassess, and check in with yourself.
I mean, the reason I asked that question is just to highlight just that, like, you can be a dietitian and still need reminders. Like nutrition, your relationship with food is an ongoing process. Like it's not something you get done with. So I don't want people listening to like feel bad if they don't think like they're healed. Like it's an ongoing relationship to continue to fine tune your body. And yeah.
I actually posted about a really simple post yesterday on Instagram that's like, I meal prep lunches this week. You know, I would not identify as somebody who like meal preps all the time. I don't create, you know, a week's worth of lunches every single week. I don't meal prep for hours on a Sunday. However, like this week, I was like, I need to meal prep some lunches, right? Like you can take things at certain times of your life to help you out and be a reminder. And I honestly think I'm trying to think of what triggered that this week, but I must have seen something or heard something that was like, Lindsey, get it together, meal prep some lunches. That's going to help you out this week, you know?
And yeah, you talked just then about the impact of nutrition, and then you previously talked about the impact of our most recent guest on your training. You said about Jen and how she's made you rethink, like give yourself a bit more compassion for where you are right now with your running and think, wow, I still have time in the years ahead. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, just putting this into the ether, do you have any dream guests? And if you're listening, send us an email, info.riseupnutrition@gmail.com.
I ultimately dream guests. I just want to continue to get people who are really knowledgeable in the science of nutrition. So researchers, you know, whether they're well known or not, but researchers and professors and people kind of hands-on in the science. And then I love getting athletes, but I love all the wide range of athletes. So, you know, we have our GOATs, you know, the Serena Williams, and we have those big names, Shalane Flanagan, and those big names that I think would be really amazing to speak to as inspiring female athletes. But I also think that people coming to this podcast want that nutrition guidance too. So I want to make sure that we try and stay science forward as well.
So yeah, Shalane Flanagan and Serena Williams, if you're listening, send us a DM. And finally, just a little plug for us. How can anyone listening support the podcast if they want to?
Yes. So you can go to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com, and there's a link to support the show. And you can do so through a really easy contribution of $1 or $5 a month, something that just kind of helps with that production side of it.
And that is appreciated.
You can also support the podcast through non-financial ways of simply giving us a 5-star, leaving a review, because when you review it on like Apple Podcasts, even though I'm a Spotify listener, you can give stars on Spotify. On Apple, you can leave reviews. And that really helps to build up, like, I don't know, all the SEO stuff of how things become searchable and how people can find the episode, and support the show by sharing it with a friend.
Yeah, continue sharing it on social media as well.
Share it on social media. Talk about it with your girlfriends. Send them the link. Talk about it with your coaches. All those things that the information's getting out, and now people have a resource, or it's not just the podcast, right? It's, hey, if this is a coach that's, you know, you sent your coach this episode, but now they're like, oh, here's a sports dietitian, and here she's got resources, or maybe I need to get in touch with her, things like that, that just, you know, you can really support the podcast just by speaking about it.
Yeah, for sure. So now we're going to get into our next little bonus round, and it wouldn't be a nutrition podcast without some nutrition talk. So I looked up the top sports nutrition trends of 2024, and I was wondering if you had any guesses. I've got a top three.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to guess. I don't know. I think one trend is continuous glucose monitors.
Nah. I'm not a music person, but this would be a big buzzer. No. It's not on this list.
Well, and then I'm going to say good because I don't think it should be, but I feel like that's a really hot topic. Wearables.
I feel like in our world of endurance sports, it is, but this is more like general population too, kind of sports nutrition.
Are we talking like food? Like what are the things to eat?
No, you're on like the right track with like glucose monitors, but
sports nutrition trends. I don't know. I feel like
general nutrition, but they're kind of sports nutrition too. Yeah, let's just say general nutrition.
Okay. I feel like we're past the like keto diet trend. I hope.
We are past keto, but we're not past protein. One of the top trends was...
Oh, yeah. So just like protein is king, like eat 30 grams of protein.
Well, especially plant-based proteins. And then protein as a whole, both animal and plant, continues to have a movement and our moment. And I was wondering like your take on these like proteinized foods like protein chips, protein ice cream, protein cereal, etc. It's getting a bit crazy.
Yeah, it is getting crazy. Protein is obviously important, but it's not like, I don't know. People are just like over glorifying it. And it's kind of at the cost of the importance of carbs and the importance of fat too. And look, I'm not against protein waffles, but also you could just eat regular waffles and then have a side of Greek yogurt, a side of sausage, a side of eggs, because you need both your carbohydrates and your protein. And so I'm also the same with the plant-based protein trend. I think it's wonderful because the idea is expand. Protein doesn't just have to be meat. Expand that beans have protein, that soy has protein, that even whole grains have protein. Wonderful. But we don't all have to be plant-based. Also, the whole term plant-based is just such a trend. Oh my goodness, what was I eating the other day? And my husband looked at the box and he was like, oh my gosh, I forget what it was, but let's just say it was almonds. And like, it like literally said like great source of plant-based protein. And my husband was like, why would somebody think this isn't plant-based? Like it's an almond, it's not meat. And I'm like, I know. It's just a thing to, market.
Yeah. Do you want some gluten-free water?
Yeah. So it's a little annoying. At the same time, maybe somebody truly doesn't understand. Like there are people who don't have nutrition education because we've done a really poor job at that in this country. So I don't know. I'm getting off topic here, but yeah, I can see how those are trends. Protein is important. It's not, but so are carbs and so are fats.
Well, yeah, the first thing you mentioned was proteins getting hyped at the cost of carbohydrates and fats. Speaking of cost, you'll often, and all food has protein. Most foods have protein in. So if you take the example of the waffle, you might have like a normal waffle with maybe 4 grams of protein in, and it costs maybe $5 for a box. Then you'll have a high protein waffle that might have 9 grams and it'll cost $10. So economically, it doesn't really make sense either. They just charge you a huge amount for a little bit more protein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other trends?
I don't know. I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but I will because this is more just in the last like 2-3 months. Definitely food ingredients are a trend in our country, in the US at the moment. I don't know if that's on there.
Yeah, that's one of them, like ingredients and like their impact on gut health.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Gut health.
So gut health is another big one. Like eating to improve gut health. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is rapid rehydration solutions.
Oh,
like the hyperhydration kind of stuff had the craze over the summer with like, drink all your salt and sodium's not bad, which I think is a great message. But I do think not everyone needs to be hydrating so much.
Yeah. So there's this sports nutrition brand, Element, LMNT, Element, that I really do like many of their products for athletes. But I've been seeing now just for the general public, because they're just trying to, they're a company, they're just trying to sell. And I've seen, I think it was some sort of podcast my husband was listening to that was like a political podcast, had nothing to do with health or athletes. And, oh, here's my discount code for Element. And I'm thinking, oh man, so now the everyday average American is just going to like consume 1,000 milligrams of sodium excessively. I'm like, what? So yeah, I can see how that's a trend right now, which is so funny because, 10 years ago, everybody was like, low sodium, don't have extra sodium. And now everybody wants sodium in their hydration. I'm not against these oral rehydration solutions, especially in the context of sports and athletes. I'm often recommending them, but I'm not sure that the general public needs it.
Yeah, as always, it goes back to like your individual needs. And I think that was another example of what we see in all kinds of sports nutrition and diet culture as a whole. Like things go in and out, like different fads. Like one day it's low carb, one day it's high carb, one day it's low sodium, the next day it's high sodium. So take all of this with a pinch of salt.
Yep.
Okay, now we've got onto a different bonus round. We're going to do a little bit of sports nutrition myth busting.
Oh.
So 3 top tips, 3 top points that I'd like you to help bust. Or tell me if it's true or false, and then explain. All you need for recovery is protein.
False. Expand.
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be helpful for our audience.
So, recovery, what are you trying to recover? So what protein is doing is repairing damaged muscle cells, and any exercise is going to cause some sort of damage to your muscle tissue. So it's repairing that. And then pending the type of exercise you did combined with the amount of protein and timing of protein, you can even build more muscle. So if you're doing strength training and hypertrophy style training, where you're trying to inflict that extra load and now you have enough protein, you can not only repair the damage, but build on top of that to literally build muscle, gain muscle, get stronger. But when we exercise, we're also depleting carbohydrates and we're also losing body fluid. So when we talk about recovery, we're also talking about recovering your energy stores that you lost and replenishing your energy through carbohydrates. And we're also talking about repairing and recovering your hydration status. So rehydrating is part of recovery as well. So if you only hit your protein, by the way, if you're still like, for whatever reason, I didn't lose much energy, I didn't burn through many carbs, the process of muscle building recovery, carbohydrates help with that, helps with the anabolic response. It helps stimulate insulin to create that anabolic response, to create growth. So you need the carbs to replenish your energy that you lost. You also need the carbs to support that protein to rebuild your muscle.
Like building muscle takes energy too.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
okay, next one. All female athletes should supplement with iron.
False. Yeah, I think that iron is extremely important. We want to make sure we're getting enough in our diet for sure. I do strongly encourage female athletes to get their iron tested a minimum of once a year, preferably more, just because things can really change throughout a competitive season or from summer to winter. So if you can do it twice, that'd be even better. If you can do it 3 times potentially, but at least once a year to keep tabs on your iron status and supplement if needed, if you have low iron supplement. I have seen female athletes overdose with iron.
Yeah, it's often like related to genetics, and there's a condition called hemochromatosis where your body stores too much iron and it can be toxic. And also, for many people should know this, like signs of iron overload are often very similar to iron deficiency. So yes, if your friend is saying they're very tired and they got their blood tested and they were low on iron and you're feeling very tired, doesn't necessarily mean you're low on iron. You might be high on iron.
Mm-hmm. In my career, this is not very many considering the amount of people I've helped, but I have diagnosed 2 people with hemochromatosis, and I've had another that came to me as a client knowing she already had it. But 2 people with, I'm fatigued, I'm lethargic, we do their blood work, and I see an extremely abnormal result. And I say, you need to go talk to your doctor now.
Abnormally high.
And abnormally high, it's, yeah. And like, so that's happened twice, that somebody's come to me complaining of these symptoms and we get the blood work done. So anyways, that's the importance of don't just supplement blindly.
Because you're an endurance athlete who's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Get tested.
And then the last myth busting is a big fan favorite. We have to include this one. Lighter and slimmer means I'll be faster.
Also false.
Really? Tell me more.
Why are you so surprised, Ruby? Come on. You're playing the part really well. Yeah. I mean, that's trying to find the most concise way to say this so I don't make this episode 3 hours long.
Just false and go listen to Carrie Verdon's episode.
Ultimately, yeah, your weight and body composition is not a direct reflection of your performance. You can find success at many different weights. You have to find what works for you. And ultimately, though there are sports where weight and body composition plays a role, or maybe even some sports that there's weight class associated to it, like in fighting, or lightweight rowing. It's like you have to be X weight to even compete in this category. I get that. However, you still have to be nourished. You have to be fully nourished, fully energized. You need to make sure that your muscles are strong, that you're recovering well, that your hormones are in a good place. And so instead of achieving, let me find this particular weight that I think I'm supposed to be, instead find that the health that helps you perform your best. And you might find, I've known, and again, as you get older, you find, oh, I performed really well at this weight, but also at this weight, but also at this weight, because there's so many other things that affect your performance besides weight.
Yeah.
It's the training, the hours you put into it, the environment that day, your stress levels, how well you're sleeping. So there's so many factors that affect performance. To just say that you'll be better or faster if you're lighter is just so blatantly wrong.
You'll probably also be injured. So you're not going to be faster if you're injured.
Yeah.
So I have 2 quick personal questions before we're going to go into the end of the podcast questions. Then we're done. So the personal is, these can be short answers. Are you working on anything professionally that you want to tease?
Yes. 2 things. The first is, as I stepped away from work, I finally found the time and creativity to get working on my book. It's going to happen, but this is I'm still trying to get a publisher. And then even when I get a publisher, it's probably going to be a 1 to 2 year process. So man, I'd love to have the book out by 2026, but that's probably still wishful thinking. But I'm chugging away a little bit every single day, chugging away. So that's the first thing. So stay tuned.
And if you want to follow along with your writing, you have a newsletter that you can check out. We'll link to that in the bio too.
Yes. And the second thing is that I did take a hiatus. I stopped working with clients for the past year. I'm going to re-engage. I'm still a little bit, literally, as of this moment, as I'm speaking, I'm still kind of navigating it, but I'm seriously hoping within hey, if you send me an email right now and you want to work with me, we're going to figure out a way. And for sure by January 2025, I'm going to move forward with starting up business again. So it might, again, as we started this episode, it's not going to look exactly like it did before, but I want to work. I want to do this. And I think people want to work with me. So if you do, let's make it happen.
And right now, if you need some help and you're struggling, we do have resources on the website, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And get in touch with me or get on that email list, because I'm sure in 2025 I'll send out a big email saying now accepting clients, but yeah, just that it is going to happen.
Okay, so one more question is just one that I'm curious about. What's with the name change with the website from Rise Up Nutrition to Female Athlete Nutrition? Are they the same or different?
Yeah, it's all the same. So nitty gritty details, but for tax purposes, I did have to dissolve my LLC. So done.
That was Rise Up Nutrition.
Yeah. And also people kept going to the website, which was all reflective of my services, which were on pause. While I kept the podcast going, I just thought I kind of wanted, let me just set up a website for the podcast, Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. So I'll probably, Rise Up Nutrition, I'm probably going to reestablish the LLC once I have to for tax purposes. So, it's business. It's allowed to change. Go with the flow. Don't worry about it. But now I do, I didn't want my old website to dissolve, but I also didn't want to edit the whole thing. So I just kind of left it as it was. And I was like, all right, podcast resources are on podcast website. And so I'll probably just have two websites moving forward. And don't worry about the business name. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I think that's a really good idea though, for when people are Googling Female Athlete Nutrition podcast and they have a website that says it in the name.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I'll say is that from my perspective as a dietitian, I'm not against working with men or people who identify not as female. So I think that was another thing is this is the name of my podcast. This is something I've specialized in, and I want to continue specializing in female athlete nutrition. That's very important to me to support females in sport. That is very important to me. However, I am open to other things and other genders and sexes. So I just wanted to kind of differentiate that a little bit.
Yeah, and even on this podcast, we've talked to a few male athletes who have struggled with eating disorders and disordered eating. So it's very much inclusive.
and optimal performance, like any athlete who's trying to change their nutrition or improve their nutrition to perform better.
Okay, so now we're going to get on to the end of the podcast questions. I don't know if you actually answered these before in a row. I know you've kind of given your opinion sometimes. So if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
I'm going to shock everybody here. I know.
Don't change your answer. I've got one written down that you've said multiple times.
I know that I have said multiple times, but I've reflected on this after hosting the podcast before. I've multiple times said coffee or ice cream because I do have coffee every day.
Ice cream was the one I had down, yeah.
Okay, but I have recently changed. I have changed. I have been living in San Antonio for so long.
Tacos!
But I love tacos, but I'm going to be a little more specific. Quesadillas. I could eat cheese in a tortilla all day, every day. All day, every day.
I mean, check out Lindsey's Instagram for like breakfast tacos, quesadillas, all times a day. Yeah, you're going hard.
We eat so many. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not? I don't know. When I move out of San Antonio, I don't know what I'm going to eat anymore. But like my life revolves around tacos now.
I mean, they're also pretty good because you can make them like low sugar, whereas like making low sugar ice cream is kind of gross.
Not good at all. And you're thinking for Levi's sake, yes, everybody in my family can enjoy quesadillas and tacos. And I love cheese.
Okay, I think this one is changing too because like you mentioned before, you've been struggling a bit with injury or like your training. What is your favorite sport to participate in currently?
Okay, literally right now, I am just loving weightlifting. I love running. And I love even just cardio. I'm trying to do the Peloton because I'm injured. And I do get this like endorphin, this like cathartic endorphin release when I'm doing cardiovascular. But the strength that I feel, not just as I'm doing weightlifting, but afterwards throughout the rest of my day, when I feel strong, is really empowering. So I do weightlift multiple times a week and I do it all. I love Olympic style weightlifting. Because I think that it's like more challenging.
That makes me feel powerful. Yeah.
Yes. So clean and press, snatches, like hex bar deadlifts. I love doing that. I am not the strongest girl in the gym at all, but it's also a complex move, right? So I don't just do this. I was trained. I've had strength coaches in the past. I've worked with some amazing strength coaches who have helped me with my form. And so I'm pretty knowledgeable on how to do Olympic style weightlifting. And I would never compete in this sport. I'm not at that level at all, but I enjoy doing it.
You're making me jealous. For those who don't know, which is probably most people listening, I only have one hand at the moment. I was in a major bike accident, and so I'm in a sling. So I'm missing out on my lifting. And I also am not in a great relationship with running or biking. So twinning. How about as a spectator? What is your favorite sport to watch?
Seeing as I ask people these questions, I should really have quicker responses. I think it'll really morph as my children grow because they are toddlers and they're both obsessed with basketball. And I just like, we play basketball at the YMCA together. And I just love watching Gabe, who's not even 3 yet, attempt to dribble the ball. And it's so fun, right? So probably whatever my kids get into, I'm going to love watching. I do love watching running and track and field because like and gymnastics. Actually, I'm actually not going to say gymnastics, but because it's something I've experienced myself, like the thrill of it, like excites me and I understand how it works. And track and field specifically, like watching a 1500 or 400 hurdles or something like that was really fun. The reason I actually pulled back on the gymnastics one is because it's a little too close to home. I actually and it's funny because I haven't done gymnastics in years, but like my heart, like I get nervous. I get nervous watching them now because I used to do it and I was nowhere near as good as these collegiate girls are now. But I get a little too nervous. So that's probably actually not my favorite spectator sport to watch.
It's maybe similar. Like I don't really like watching 5K or 10Ks because it's my sport. And like I'm in my head, I'm like, I want to be out there. So like I kind of pull back as well.
Yeah.
But no, and I love watching gymnastics.
Yeah.
And the last question, if there's a female athlete out there that you want to give a shout out to, even in your personal life or super well known, just for being an inspirational or a role model for any reason, who would it be and why? And you can say me.
But yeah, I've given this answer before and it's might be a little underwhelming, but my shout out goes to my clients and to people like you, Ruby, and my clients who we just like, I love the famous athletes, like that's impressive, but it's the everyday people who are passionate about sports and give it 100% and get out there and compete and sign up for something, not knowing how it's going to go, that are just like the thrill of participation. And people as well, when I say my clients that have maybe like struggled a little bit here and there, whether it be with their nutrition, with their body, with injuries, with their identity, and the fact that they push past that and show up time and time again, that's inspiring to me. So it's my clients, it's you, it's the listeners of this podcast. I'm going to give a shout out to my sisters. My sisters always inspire me as well.
Let's shout out your mom and your dad too. Thank the family.
Yeah, thank the family, all of them. My sister just visited me and she has 3 kids and lives in Colorado and was really big into trail running and distance running and prior to kids but like has kept it up somehow, like even more so than me. Like she did a half marathon a few weekends ago. I was like, how are you doing this? With juggling 3 kids, but she does. So
yeah, she's an inspiration.
Things like that. Those are the stories.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much for being a guest on your own podcast. One quick thing to the listeners, if you are listening and you have any guest suggestions, you can leave comments in Spotify or you can email us at info.riseupnutrition@gmail.com. If you have any topics you want discussed, you can do that there too, because Lindsey can talk about them on a future Fast Fueling Facts, or we can bring in a guest. So yeah, let us know any comments, suggestions you have. Go give this podcast 5 stars and leave a review and share on all your listening platforms. Thank you, Lindsey.
Thank you, Ruby.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, if you are a true fan of female athlete nutrition, then I would love if you could support our podcast by spreading the word. Share a review on your listening channel. Give us 5 stars. It really helps get the word out and get the show more views to positively impact others. Also, you can support the podcast by joining our Patreon. Head to patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition to consider a donation, or even better, join our membership where you get extra monthly content and perks. We don't want you to simply listen alone. We want you to be a part of a community and a movement of fierce, fit, and fueled female athletes. So patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition is where you can do exactly that, learn more, and join. A huge thanks to our affiliates and partners as well. Once again, Prevenix, Insight Tracker, Orgain, Practice Better, Jen and Carrie. Please go check them out, and their links in the show notes where you can get deals and discounts. Last, be sure that you do more than just listen. If you need help with fueling, it's time to take action. Head to my website to learn more. You can either book a free call with me to learn more about our coaching programs and how we can work directly with you, whether it's the fast track or otherwise. Or you can take our online self-study course, Female Athlete Nutrition. You can literally sign up and gain access right now. You can explore our downloadable products, including the Red S Recovery Guide, High Iron Fueling Guide. Or if you are a coach of a team, check out our brand new Coaches Toolkit for teams. You can also just learn more. We have a blog, a Red S quiz to see if Red S is affecting you. If you need help, I want you to get help fast. Too many girls and athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. You can rise up with the power of nutrition, take action today in any of these avenues, and become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.